Welcome to the podcast. It starts with you, with me, Vic O'Farrell. I ask my guests, by understanding their own behaviours and personality style, what impact on their lives, both personally and professionally, has there been? What is it like to live and work with someone of your style? I mean, this is not about labelling people, putting people in boxes, or an excuse for bad behaviour. It's about recognising, understanding and respecting that we're all different. And what impact can you have on others by looking in the mirror? Because it starts with you. So welcome to another episode, and I am delighted today to be joined by the absolutely fabulous Heather Wright. Heather, would you like to introduce yourself and also let people know what your personality style is in terms of the disc profiling?
Of course, yeah. I am a conference speaker and MC, and I also run training courses on behavioral neuropsychology, so how to change habits. So that includes leadership, sales, quite a lot of sales stuff, as well as presentation skills and personal impact. Very, very important. So yeah, and that's what I do. My behavioral style is, I have two main drivers. I'm incredibly high I. If there's a bell curve, I'm kind of off the scale. And that is increased by the fact that I basically have no S. Just none, just completely impatient, fast paced, talk fast, think fast. Not when I say think fast, I'm not necessarily saying the quality is good, but I think rubbish really quickly if I need to. So that, of course, makes the I seem much higher. But if we want to put the other two in play, I am quite conforming. I'm not as assertive as people think I am, but that's because I'm a high I with no patience. So that's my style.
Oh, so very interesting. So for those that are listening and have listened to episodes before, you'll also know that my I is extreme and off the bell curve, but mine comes in with the red D. So yes, I can come across as a bit rude, but I'm like you. I'm fast paced. I'm think. But what I'd love to explore here is, because you are so, what I would say, emotionally intelligent about your own behaviours, what is it like, because of what you do, to have to work in a style that's different to yours? First of all, in terms of, let's not look at Heather. We'll look at that in a little bit. But what's it like to look at Heather with a mask on?
Well, the nice thing about being I, okay, big I, sounds like very dramatic, I like a song, is I get away with a lot. Because not only, and this isn't always the case, but I do a lot of comedy. Now, just because you're a high I doesn't necessarily mean you're a funny person or a witty person. It just means, you're sociable and all that kind of stuff. But mine does come in with a certain amount of that as well. So if we put the skill with the profile and you put those together, that means I get away with an awful lot, because that friendly personality for most people means you can get away with murder. However, I know that this can be quite overbearing for people. So I have absolutely had to learn to curtail my I when I first meet people. And what I do is, when I first meet people, I keep it a little bit under wraps, and then I gradually ramp it up as they get used to me, because we know that people are more accepting once they've bought into you. It's fine. But I have had to learn, because I do quite a bit of coaching. So, of course, the different methods by which I translate my material to people, of course, is you've got big conference speech, in which case you've got interaction, but nobody's going to interrupt you. Your listening skills don't have to be mega. Okay, then you've got training, where your listening skills are important, but then you've got coaching, where your listening skills are absolutely vital. And I've had to really learn to listen. It does help that I have become obsessed with the three parts of a conversation, which is FBI hostage negotiators talk a lot about it, and learning to listen to people's words and understand their identity and reading between the lines. And I've become a little bit obsessed with fixing that puzzle. And the great thing about that is it gives my brain a lot to do while somebody's talking. So when I'm listening, I'm not just listening to what they think they're saying, I'm listening to what they don't realize they're saying. So the nice thing about that is I've got an internal dialogue that's going on that keeps my I and my pace, my no S happy. because I'm working, oh, they said this, or I wonder if they mean this, blah, blah, blah. Oh, let me ask that question. So that works nicely. My challenge is when I meet someone who's highly assertive, and I'm not particularly assertive myself. They think I am because of my impatience. And so they expect me to be, and I've got to be careful not to sometimes take things personally. Now, the good news is then we'll add the skill in there. Being into behavior and being a behavioral analyst means that I tend to, after the initial emotional reaction, I can logically think it through and go, well, of course, they're obviously high D, so this is what they mean, and there's nothing personal. So I flex it that way. And when I'm coaching, and I know I've got somebody who is maybe, I guess the biggest difference is that I've got someone who's very low I or very high C. Those are the biggest differences to my profile. So I absolutely have to become much calmer and much more into that. I guess the word that we don't like to use, but is a brilliant word, is I become, instead of puppy dog, hello, how are you? Bah, 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 let me jump up and lick your face, too lovely. Like so, I don't lick people's faces. That is a metaphor. Which I haven't done for a while, been married for too long. But I become more what you would call nice, if you want. At least I hope you do. But I become that kind of calm listener. And I've also learned, I tend to sound like this a lot, because this tells me to shut up and listen. And when I do that, these switch on. And so I've learned, I've got quite a lot of learned behaviors for that listening, problem solving, and then coaching, asking questions instead of solving, you know. So there's a lot of flexing that happened there. Now, when I first started training, I actually was, because as we know, things change over time, my first ever profile came over that I was much higher in D. But I found that as a trainer, that I tended to be too challenging. With that and the high I and the impatience, it was a little bit too much in your face. I did well, but I didn't do as well as I could. And so that ability to, when somebody's saying, even if they're being rude and challenging and going, I disagree, blah, 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 and they haven't really grasped what you're saying, so they think they're disagreeing. You know, at one point I might have gone, well, actually, you've misunderstood me there. So let me just, and then make them feel like a fool, which is, you know, can be that kind of, I've got to win, to this, okay, that's interesting. Tell me a little bit more about that. Okay, so if I said blah, 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 what would you say? So I've learned, and those are communication skills that just help us to calm that profile down and flex it a little bit. And of course, gets the result that we want, because our intent versus our skill, you know, they're not always the same. You intend to be friendly as a high I, don't you? You want to be loved. But if your communication skills aren't so good, then you can end up undermining your desperate intent to be liked.
Wow. Oh, absolutely. So I've just written some things on there. So for those that are listening, when Heather said she's learned to do this, that's actually her putting her finger over her lips.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, forget it's a podcast. My bad.
Podcast, yeah. No, it's okay. This is also on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. But yeah, and that's much fun. So, but one of the things I just want to pick up on what you said there was about, you know, wanting to get in and fix problems, but also it's the fact that your high I, that emotionally driven, sorry, not dread, driven part of our personality that takes everything personally. And especially the more extreme it is, the more personal we take it. How have you learned? What little techniques would you say to people to stop that emotion coming and look at it in a more logical fashion?
Okay, so one of the things I teach a lot about is the way our brain fires and the connections. And of course, part of that, as we know, is behavioral profiling is just one of the skills and the things that's so good to know and understand. But I spend a lot of time talking about how we build connections in the brain, therefore to change habits. And habits are not just behavioral habits, but habits are thought processing habits and emotional habits. So we can build a habit of curiosity. We can build a habit that puts an intervention in place so that we don't react emotionally. Now, I've done several different versions of profiling. One of the first I did was, funnily enough, DISC. But I do another one, and that one also has an emotional maturity vector, and I score very highly on that. Now, that's not always a good thing, because what it means is you can become an overthinker. You can put too many filters in place and not allow yourself to be yourself. But what that means is I can learn, and actually I think anybody can do this once you learn, but I can learn to think something through, both logically and emotionally. So if we create the connections in our brain, that when somebody says something, and they've said it, a lot of people say stuff that's offensive, and their intent is not always offensive. Yeah, sometimes they are just bad communicators, or indeed they're skill based. I've been doing a lot of this at the moment when I teach handling difficult conversations, and we are so used to the idea of, if somebody's upset us, going in and going, you've upset me, you need to be told of what you've done wrong. And I'm teaching people to go in and talk about what they want rather than what they don't want. And people kind of go, but that won't work. And the only reason they're saying that is because it's a new concept to them, because their habit has always been, everyone else does it that way. I go, yeah, but as we know, that's not always successful. Try this way. So we can learn and we can change that. When something stops becoming new, it becomes familiar. And then we can start to build it, like anything we have learned, a physical skill. We can learn when we know we can learn that. We could learn archery or billiards or chess. But we also know, or we need to know, that we can also learn emotional flexibility. And I've found that this helps me, because when I was much younger, I was very sensitive and I would take things very personally. And the thing was, because I wanted people to like me, I wasn't aggressive about it. I just went away hurt. And I realized that I was losing hours, sometimes days, being hurt when it wasn't really necessary. So I learned that skill of communication. I learned that skill of curiosity. So I put a filter on now. And I also know that the primary reaction may be an emotional one, but if we can get that secondary reaction to kick in as quickly as possible, and we can change that emotion, the chemicals in the body can be changed. The reason we're feeling angry is because we're thinking angry thoughts, not necessarily because that idiot cut us up in the road. It's because we're thinking, that idiot cut me up. Whereas, I learned little phrases like, interesting maneuver, stuff like that. And then I start to laugh to myself. We can also, you will know about what we call reframing. So you change the way you look at a situation. And again, being into comedy, we know that someone, Peter Kay, Jimmy Carr, Eddie Izzard, Victoria Wood was one of my favorites, can take a situation that is usual. And they basically, to get humor, they reframe it. They put one thing with another. Well, we can start to do that. And I find I giggle often more now. I have to be careful, because you can't always share the thing that made you laugh, but at least I'm not feeling upset anymore.
I have the phrase of like, oh, your mother must be proud. when, like you say, with a bit of road rage, when someone else has done a maneuver that perhaps pulled out on you or something, and you go to bib them, or you just to let them know that you're there, and rather than them turning around and doing that, if someone's got emotion, because they tell me, go, oh, I'm sorry, didn't mean that, that's fine, and then you go off, don't you? It's the person that turns around and gives you the bird, or any other kind of hand gesture, and you just go, oh, your mother must be proud, your stress levels must be through the roof because you haven't done anything to me, we didn't collide, off you go.
Yeah,
it's
we watch people getting angry all the time. You can sit in traffic and look around and see angry drivers, and you just wonder how much time you're wasting. Now they think, well, I can't help that. And I think the first time anyone ever said this to me, someone said, you need to change the way you're thinking. And I kind of just turned around and went, well, you can't. All my thoughts are just buzzing around in my head. You can't control that. And especially if you're a very impatient person, so you've got that low S, it really just feels like you're not in control. But the truth of the matter is, you can actually learn to control the way you think by building the connections, because it becomes a path of least resistance. The electricity goes down a different pathway, and emotions are purely our chemicals released into our system. And therefore, I just learned gradually. I mean, like I say, that was the first time somebody told me, and I just kind of went, oh, they're talking rubbish. And then it was only when I learned the stuff about the brain and started studying the neuropsychology that I started going, oh, okay, actually, you can reprogram your brain. Actually, if we took a scan of our brain today, and then we did something by habit every day, maybe we had a personal trainer who told us to do a particular thing, and we took another scan of it, let's say 5-6 weeks later, we could actually literally see the growth. And when that path of least resistance becomes, when the secondary pathway becomes larger than the first pathway, then, or greasier, as I'm told to call it. I don't like the idea of talking about somebody having a greasy brain. It doesn't sound good, does it? But
a greasy pathway. No, clear that one.
not nice.
No.
Not nice. I don't like to think of anything being that greasy.
So if you, sorry, listeners, I'm going off on a complete giggle now. It's actually like talking to Victoria Wood, I have to say.
Yeah, sorry.
So it's if you think about, so the second part, what did you do then in terms of like we go back to being in the car and being angry, because that is a reaction, isn't it? How did you stop yourself getting angry and turning around and saying, well, interesting maneuver?
Well, the first, so if you look at habit loops, what you look for is the cue to the habit, and the cue to the habit was somebody else's behavior, or it can be location or whatever it is. But there's another piece to that, which is actually just changing the way your brain works. So when you're not in the car, when you're not in a place where you get angry, it's actually logically thinking through when you're in a calm state of mind. I suppose I would liken that to, if you're a tennis player, you don't just practice the shots when you're on the court, you practice in the training, you have them coming over and over and over, practice, so that when you're surprised by a shot, your body, your muscle memory has learned. And it's exactly the same. So I talk about having morning routines and maybe evening routines where we dump stuff and we practice our thought processes. And if we know, and the situations when we know we're likely to get cheesed off. So we know we're going into a meeting with somebody who, let's say somebody who's lots of D in them, but they've got no communication skills, and their behaviors are akin to bullying, even though they wouldn't call themselves a bully. Then you know what that's going to be like. So I write at the top of my pad a few little thought processes that go, it's just a habit, it's not personal. If I come in underneath that, if I keep my tone low, if I challenge that behavior in a really nice way to say, whoa, can we just take a minute and step back? And I've developed those as habits. And for me, those are the interventions. In the moment I've developed that habit, while I'm saying that particular phrase, my brain's taking, if you like, a deep breath and going, yeah, okay, let's not respond the way we used to. Let's do the new habit. And I tend to refer to that as the sliding doors moment. You know the film Sliding Doors? I know 1990s, and I know some people go, I don't know that, but it's a great film.
Brilliant.
But there's that moment when Gwyneth Paltrow, and this isn't a spoiler alert, it's right at the beginning, she's lost her job, she's going down into the tube station, and she's about to go through the sliding doors of the tube when a child gets in front of her. And at that point, the film splits into two timelines, one where she manages to get on the train and one where she doesn't. And her life is completely different in those two timelines because of that 2 to 3 minute delay. And I think our habits are those sliding doors moments, the old habit versus the new habit. And if you can recognize the cue of where that habit is, time, location, other people, emotional state, or the immediately preceding action, then you can start to slot in a little pause that gives you that moment that goes, I used to do that, but actually I'm going to do this for a while. And if you do that for a week and then celebrate, then 2 weeks. So it's really easy, because a lot of people talk about the why, and the why is really important. I was called in to talk to some engineers recently. They were asked to collaborate. And they've done ages defining. We're really good in business about defining what we want, aren't we? We get workshops together, working groups together. We define the behaviors we want from people, and then we kind of stick it on a mouse. Well, we don't do mouse mats anymore, but posters, and we go, there, go and do it.
Yeah.
But we don't teach them how to change a habit. So I was called in and everybody said, come in and motivate them. They didn't need motivating. They wanted to collaborate. It's just that their older habit was because they were getting enough reward from non-collaboration. So actually I spent time just working on, let's change the habit, let's understand the habit, and let's understand where the cue is. So we can flex that profile. We're not changing who they are. We're not changing their character. We're just changing a skill. Character or behavioral style is very different from skill, isn't it? Wouldn't you think? Don't you think?
No, absolutely. And I think if anyone's listening to this thinking, oh my God, that's a massive thing. You know, if you think about, you know, oh my God, to stop getting road rage when somebody cuts me up, that's huge. But you're saying, yeah, but you don't think about it when you're in the moment. You think about it before and you change small habits. A bit like if I turn around and said, well, I'm going to run the London Marathon next year. You know, that's massive. I mean, like, my God, I can't even run a bath at the moment, let alone a marathon. But I'd be thinking, well, I just need to change my habits small. So
that's right.
What kind of advice would you give to people in terms of how do you approach breaking down those habits to just make them bite size and easy to do?
Sure. Sure. So it's exactly that. It's how big a bite works with you. So we go for. I once heard a story, not my story, a story about somebody who's really struggling with their weight, and their coach, their trainer, said, "Right, we need to get you to do some more exercise." And they would set them goals, and then the coach would come back and they go, "Did you do the run?" And they go, "Well, no, not really." At least they were honest, I suppose. And then they would say, "Oh, smaller goals." And then eventually the coach said, "Listen, when you come home from work at 5 o'clock, I just want you to go upstairs, put your trainers on, come downstairs, take them off again. So that's all I want you to do. If you can do that 3 times a week, that's great." Anyway, next time the coach saw them and said, "Did you do that?" They went, "Yes, I did that." He said, "Brilliant. Now I'd like you to." He said, wait a minute. As I had my trainers on, I felt daft taking them straight off again. So I went for a walk, which had been one of the, then they thought about going for a walk. They didn't want to do it, but when they just put their trainers on. So I break it down. Yeah. I find I'm not massively good at, and a lot of us are like this actually. The reward for the habit needs to be very close to the habit. Like training a dog. You can't give a dog a treat 10 minutes after they've done something well. Now, we as humans, we can think and we can logically go, this is a treat. But one of the challenges we have most of the time is, for instance, I eat the cake now, but the punishment is in 3 months' time when I'm on the beach going, "Oh, I don't look good in my swimming costume anymore." You know, the reward or the punishment is so far away. So we have to learn psychological rewards are really important. So a little habit and a little reward, preferably not food or alcohol based, is the caveat. Okay. But the little reward, the psychological reward, is very powerful. I did a great job. I did a really good job today. Look what I did. But we tend to intervene with that and go, "No, but all you did was this. You're pathetic." And it's controlling that in our head. So it's about having that quick reward and understanding what rewards we get. So let me give you an example of a psychological reward that most people often don't realize. And let's use alcohol. So when I ask a room of people, what's the reward for drinking? They instantly go to all the physical rewards. Oh, it relaxes you. It makes you less socially awkward. You feel a bit drunk. Absolutely, those are there. But the reason a lot of us drink when we first start is because it's a treat. Yeah, we see it as a treat. I don't know about you, but I do, because I mostly, except during lockdown, most of us only drink on a Friday night to give us a reward for the end of the week, or a Saturday night because it's weekend. Yeah, and when the sun is out, we're sitting on, out in the garden and the sun's out. We go, "Oh, it would be nice to have a beer or a glass of wine." It's more a treat. I'm obviously not referring to as when we have a bit of an alcohol issue. So I then went, well, what else is a treat for me? And I don't really eat chocolate. I don't particularly like chocolate, but there are some chocolates I quite like. But I don't allow them myself because I'm a woman of a certain age and it takes longer for me to get rid of the negatives. So when I sit down and it's a school, let's say after the pandemic, when we were trying to change back from habits where we were sitting at home more often and drinking more in the evening, it was just a habit. So when I sat down, I went, how can I reward this psychologically? Psychologically, I need a treat. Not I deserve, I need a treat. So what's that treat? And it can be lots of things. And I can easily sort out the habit of having that little bit of chocolate. I am lucky because when I do have chocolate, I don't tend to eat the whole bar, I tend to have a small amount. But I've had that treat. So I don't think we should underestimate the power of a psychological reward. And I think we tend to think only of rewards. We actually only think of habits as being physical as well. When I ask people, what's your habit? They think about biting nails or smoking. Yeah. As opposed to I get angry at people who I feel defensive when somebody says. Those are all habits too.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think I'm like you though in terms of the chocolate. I know I could have a little square. I don't demolish the whole bar. I feel fortunate like that, except if I happen to packet of peanuts, I've inhaled the box.
Absolutely.
So in terms of personalities though, do you think any of the particular styles find it easier or harder to change habits?
Do I've thought about this quite a lot. I often think that obviously your high Ds are very determined, but high Ds can be just as self-destructive if they're determined, and they can argue themselves into it. Well, I want this, so I'm having it. They can be like that. If you give a process, to a high C, and you tell them those are the rules, then actually they're quite good at, because they're conforming, you know, they want rules, so give them rules. So if you say the rule is now that you don't eat this particular food, then if you can appeal to that, I think with anything, there's the other side of it, which is what's that person's identity? Because you've got two things, haven't you? You've got their profile, but you've also got their, how do they see themselves? Do they see themselves as determined? Do they see themselves as structured? Do they see? So I tend to appeal to that. But yeah, I do think that there are some profiles, if we appeal to the profile, we can use it. So I would appeal if you've got someone who's very red. But if you've got someone who's very low on red and very customer service orientated, then we would appeal to, you know, the softer side of their profile in order to persuade. But yeah, but highly conforming people probably easier to do. But you see, then I can also argue that if you're a high S, you're calmer and can probably think it through a little bit smoother. Whereas if you're low on the S, you've already eaten the blooming thing before. Oh, darn it! Oh, where did that go? It's like the peanuts. Where did all the peanuts go?
I appear to have inhaled them. But on the high S, the green side of things, you know, they're the style that don't really like change. So actually getting them to change habits could also be tougher.
Yeah. So there's all sorts of other pieces that come in there. For me, I tend to look at other stuff as well as that profile. I say, okay, this might be difficult for you because of this, but let's also put that in with how important the goal is to you. So that's when we bring in the why. But also I do find I give people a 5-step process for habit change, and nearly, not everyone, but nearly all styles like a process because they can appeal to it. So, you know, your high Ds or your reds, they like a process. Oh, this is good because I can see what I'm getting. I can see my return on investment. I can win. I can win with this. You know, brilliant. I can be better than other people. You know, your high Is, people will like me more if I do this. You know, I won't be rejected if I, you know. So there's always things we can appeal to. But you're right. Each profile has its pros and cons, doesn't it, with regard to habit change? But I do meet. Sometimes I ask people, do you have a process for habit change? And it's often the reds who just go, yes, I do. I usually find only about, if I have let's say I'm doing it online and I've got a couple of hundred people online and I ask them to type something in the chat and I say, how many people have a process? I do find that 95% of people don't have a process for habit change, but the ones that do tend to be red, and they tend to say, well, my process is I just stop. Well, that's not a process. That's just being determined. That's just, you know, it. I just stopped. I did it for, I smoked for, you know, 30 years, and one day I just decided I was going to stop. You know, yeah, it's not really a process though, is it? So it can vary.
Oh, and you know what? It's fascinating, like you say, when you, what I liked what you just said then, picking up on it, was the fact that, you know, every style has a different thing. There's no right or wrong. It's this whole self-awareness about, you know, recognizing, understanding, respecting that we're all different, and being able to flex to become someone else, or not to become someone else, but to flex enough that you're still authentically you.
Yeah.
And that is a skill that can be learned. Where would you say someone would need to start in terms of doing that flex, authentic flex?
Okay, so I totally agree with that. And I suffered a lot from being inauthentic when I was younger because everybody told me off for talking. At school, they talked on. My nickname was Chatterbox. You will relate to this. You Chatterbox, you're always talking. And I never realized they were saying it actually in quite a sweet way. And I remember being really offended when my business partner, once I was giving somebody a lift to the station, said, oh, I can give you a lift to the station. I was about to leave. And he jokingly said to the person who's getting in the car, he said, when you get out the car, you might feel like you've gone deaf. It's okay. It's just because Heather's not with you anymore. And I remember being really hurt. And then realizing that actually that was them saying it in a loving way, which, you know, was like, okay, really? No, but it was, they really liked that. But I was constantly curbing my eye. So what I had to do was learn to be real. I had to delve into what my values are and what's important to me. And I call that my core, my identity, my core. And I became really sure about who I was. and my intent behind everything. The authenticity can come from developing that skill, the skill that manifests your intent. And just because I talk a lot doesn't mean I can't learn not to. And if I learn not to, I'm not being me, because my intent is that I really desperately want to help people. And I learned that actually talking them to death isn't doing me any favors, it's not helping them. So I went to my values, and I went to this, I have a particular value, which is trying to see things from other people's point of view. I call it see the balance, which is very few people believe they are bad. Very few. Maybe the prisons have a few of them in there, and maybe not so, but most people have a narrative in their head that say, well, I don't know why people think this, because and it's becoming curious about what people's intent is. The issue can be their skill. They're doing the wrong stuff to get to where they want to go to. So this piece of understanding your values and understanding who you are is, I think, a really, really important part of being authentic and self-discovery. And then going, what skills do I need? What skills do I need to learn to make sure I manifest my values and who I really am? And when do I just allow myself to absolutely go with, I'm going to I used to live in Scotland, the word blether, I don't know whether you know, but blether on, that's okay. But now I know I've built that thought process that says, it's time to shut up here, Heather. I know you're in a social situation, it's not a work situation, but do you know what? As much as you think you're entertaining, it'd be good for other people to get a word in, because it's good to listen to. So it's for me, that understand your values. Then when you put your head down on the pillow at night, you can look back on your day and go, am I pleased with myself? I'm not worried about this is my challenge was I was always worried what other people thought. I've now got to the point where I rarely worry about what other people think, unless, of course, it's a client, because you don't get business if you don't deal with the clients who like what you do and that you like what they do.
So where, without giving obviously everything away that you do, because people can find you after listening to this podcast, if someone wanted to start with, where do I understand what my values are?
Do you know what? It's really funny. I do a lot of this when I'm doing leadership courses. One of the first places we start is who do you want to be as a leader? And it's an easy question, who do you want to be as a leader? But when I say to people, if you had to stand up now and do a little speech, imagine you've just started with a company and you're doing a little speech about who you are and what your leadership style is and what your values are, could you do it? And very few people say they could. And it doesn't mean they haven't got values. It's that they're not clear enough to drive their behavior. And if they're not clear enough to drive behavior, then it means we will occasionally, when we're in an emotional situation, go against our values for expediency or for fear. And then later on go, do you know what? I shouldn't have done that. So one of the first start, if people go, well, how do I start? I say, tell me about the people you most admire and why you admire them. Because usually that means, and I don't mean skill-based, as I admire loads of singers because they're amazing singers, but it doesn't mean I've got a singer hidden inside of me. But when you admire a leader because of their values, because of who they are, then we can start to get to the point of what we desire. Because I think our values are two things. They're about who we are, but they're who we aspire to be as well. And I think that's a good thing. I think we should aspire to be better. It's great aspiring to be the best, but I think aspiring to be better is a great thing. And I think character goals are more important than financial or material goals. Our character goals must underpin anything. I think Jackie Stewart wrote a book, the racing car driver. He said, winning is not enough.
Yeah.
And he's not saying winning is not enough, I want more. He said, winning is not enough. It's the way in which you win. Basically, it's who you are.
Yeah.
My kids have that expression. Do you know the expression when they go, well, you don't want to be that guy? They talk about people, they go, oh, I don't want to be that guy. It's like, who's that guy? Who's that person? And what we mean is, I want to be a good person. So what do I mean by that? And then I want them to make it tangible. So I then say, right, if you've narrowed it down to say 4 or 5 different aspects, one of our challenges is that values are not a word. Values are a concept. So what we have to do is we have to explain the concept. I mean, nearly everybody puts the word honesty in there. But when I challenged them with certain questions, I mean, I was doing it the other day with a group of people who said, I'd put honesty down and said, brilliant, let me ask you a couple of questions then. Fell at the first hurdle. And the first question was a really simple one. Your boss, you've got a phone call and it's somebody for your boss, and your boss is going, tell them I'm out, tell them I'm out. What do you do? And this person said, oh, I tell them I'm out. I said, okay, you've fallen at the first hurdle. I've got two much harder questions coming up. You probably don't want them. It's like, what do you mean by honesty? Because it's like shades of it. What do we mean? Are you, yeah, go on.
I was going to say that is the thing, isn't it? The word honesty or the word truth can mean different things to different people. It's like you say, it's breaking those words down in terms of what does it mean to you, and your character as a human.
That's right. And I ask about the what, the why, and the how. What does it mean? Tell me it in a story. Don't tell me it as a word. Don't describe words in a circular manner with other words. Because it doesn't mean anything in telling you a story. Tell me a story with regard to your behaviors. In this situation, this is what I do. In that situation, this is what I don't do. Will I speak honesty to power? So recently I was in with an organization and they were talking about challenging the boss. The boss, very, very high D, totally unaware of being overbearing and occasionally shutting people down so they didn't have a say. The boss thinks they are very inclusive, but they were frightened to challenge. I said, but it's one of your values is honesty. And do you see that if you don't do that, can you define your honesty as being dishonest, if you like, when you walk out the room without challenging it? What you now need is the skill base to challenge it in such a way that it lands, not challenge it in such a way that you're rude and you make the person defensive and their ego kicks in. So we need the what, the why, and the how. What does it mean? Why is it important to me? Without it, what would happen, or who would I be? And then the how. I need a skill base that teaches me to manifest that value in every area of my life in a good way. But also, how am I going to remind myself in moments that are emotionally charged? So so a great example is, so honesty is really, really important to me. My kids kind of go, oh, Mum, you're obsessed with it. But also I want to be liked, because I've got that yellow, that eye. I want to be liked. So I absolutely had to learn how to challenge people or how to say no to people, but in such a way that I wasn't being rude, I wasn't creating defensiveness, so that's when we had to learn to flex our behaviors and our styles, because you will have met people as well. People will use their personality profile as an excuse. They'll say, well, I'm just being honest. No, you were being blunt and rude. That's a different thing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. One of the things I always say when I'm either doing a conference talk or a masterclass, or whatever it is that this is not an excuse for bad behavior. Because if it is, then you're not the type of person I want to work with, because I'm about being authentic, definitely. I mean, honestly, Heather, this has been amazing, and I could talk for hours with you. But there was a certain other person that said, I bet you go over time. So we won't mention them.
Have we?
Well, no, but we're there where we should be wrapping it up now.
We've got to prove him wrong.
But what I would like to say is you've given so much value in terms of this conversation. And I'm sure there are people listening thinking, oh my God, I'd love to get to know Heather more, because I know you've got an amazing YouTube channel. So how do people get in contact with you? Obviously, everything's going to go in the show notes, but if you've got someone right now with a pen and paper going, how do I get in contact with Heather?
Well, you've got Heather Wright Live and Kicking is my YouTube channel. Remember, I'm a martial artist originally, so Heather Wright Live and Kicking. Or you can get me on heather.wright@advance-performance.co.uk. So advance-performance.co.uk. You can always get in touch. But the YouTube channel, Heather Wright Live and Kicking, just remember I do flying kicks. Not so much anymore, though. Getting old.
Well, so that's a conversation for another time as well, because I used to do martial arts. Oh, so much.
Oh, didn't know that.
There you go. Thank you all for listening.
How has this conversation had an impact on you? What have you learnt? What will you do differently? Do leave a review on Apple or Spotify on It Starts With You podcast. And also leave a comment down below. Do also then connect with me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn. And why not even join the Facebook group It Starts With You and keep the learning ongoing. Thank you for listening.